Says if the human race started from Adam and Hawa and their offspring, all those offspring are brothers and sisters. That's correct. No matter how many children Adam and Hawa have, they will all be brothers and sisters. They will be genetically similar to each other as well. And so he explains, this is his uncle's objection, Shaykh explains. He says, what he's trying to say is that, did the human race start off with incest? If that is the case, then offspring from the result of incest are usually inbreds and deformed. Also, that does not explain why we are different, of different skin color and why our features are different. For example, Chinese, Afro-Americans, or Afro, etc. Allah. Well, is there an alternative interpretation from the atheists or from the theists? Let's take things one at a time. Even Charles Darwin, in The Origin of Species, he says that he believes that man originally arose from a single progenitor. He says if the human race started from Adam and Hawa and all their offspring are brothers and sisters. This is what the ulama have said. Muhammad Sharbin al-Khatib remarks about this in his Siraj al-Munir, his tafsir of the Quran. And he notes that it was halal for the brothers and sisters to marry each other if they were from a different watan, if they were from a different group of children, not twins, in other words, in the same at that time. It's made halal for them, but not for others, other generation. And this is something that we certainly believe in Islam. Some things are a crime in one historical period that are permitted in other historical periods. For example, making sujood, making prostration to any human being, is haram and kufr according to some of the ulama in our sharia. However, it was halal and was a form of greeting in the sharia of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. His family made sujood to him as a tahiyyah. And the angels made sujood to Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So some things are made, are halal in one period of time and haram in another period of time. It comes to the nature of crimes. Well, incest, it must be a crime. Why must it be a crime? Things are not crimes in themselves, but only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has interdicted them. Because He owns everyone. He owns everyone. They're bad because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has interdicted them, has prohibited them. So if you make something halal, it's not a crime. And nothing remains except, a Victorian repugnance or projecting, our standards on a different situation. But we believe that Allah is the font and source and giver of all morality. We say we hear and obey. They will be genetically similar to each other as well. I think he's trying to, the logical structure of the argument is that which entails an absurd result is absurd itself, if it entails, And so he says, if the human race began as a result of close relations, he terms it incest. It's not, because incest is the name of a crime, and this is not incest because it was mubah for that generation. He says, are usually inbreds and deformed. I read an interesting article about genetics recently. It was recently published, about what they termed the founder effect. Basically, the deleterious genes are recessive. In other words, they won't be expressed in a particular individual unless there is the same gene is paired with it from the other parent that is also recessive. Two recessive genes will manifest the trait, the deleterious trait. The founder effect is when this deleterious trait, for example, some deformity or some disease, is transmitted from both the mother and the father's line. So if the mother and the father come from the same genetic background, the same gene pool, very close gene pool, then there's a likelier chance that this deleterious, i.e. deformity, or this disadvantage or disease, hereditary disease, whatever it may be, will be expressed because the two recessive genes will be paired, and that's the condition for it to be expressed. If the recessive is paired with a non-recessive gene, it will not be expressed. So this is why, for example, in Bradford, where the letter comes from, 85% of the Pakistani marriages are with first cousins. Relatively high percentage. And the majority of the population are from Mirpur, a town in Kashmir. I guess it's since been inundated. It no longer exists, I understand, by a dam that's been put there, and it's underwater now. So the gene pool is limited. They also, as a statistic, they have neural degenerative disease, a spontaneous neural or nerve damage degenerative disease, is 8 times higher than the rest of the population of Britain in Bradford, among this particular population. Let's say not as a necessary outcome and concomitant of close consanguinary marriage, but rather it's the effect of the limited gene pool that the founder of the line, and the original ancestor, in other words, had these recessive genes for this neural degenerative damage. So you can have two, the study it cited a child who is 5 years old and a child who is 7 years old in the same family who are diagnosed with the same disease, which is fatal, in the same week, from this. So it's inadvisable for people of such a close, that have however, if they had a different founder, so as to speak, a different ancestor that didn't have this particular recessive gene, they wouldn't have any problem with marrying in a close consanguinary cousin marriage, first cousin marriage. So it's not a necessary outcome of a close marriage, which is mubah in Islam as well. However, it represents the founder effect with a recessive deleterious gene that is inherited from both the mother's side and the father's side. And so this is, So usually inbreds and deformed. It may be true in Bradford and in where a population is limited and has a common ancestor, or very small percentage of common ancestors. But it's not true as a global principle. It's only true in respect to when the recessive genes have been inherited from both father and mother. It also does not explain why we are different in skin color and why our features are different. The genetic research also has established beyond a reasonable doubt that all human beings are very, very, very similar. And the greatest variation between one population of human beings and another is in their face and their skin. Why? Because the variations in the face and the skin are the face and the skin are that whereby, as Steven Pinker says in his book, A Blank Slate, which is an interesting book, as he notes, is that by which the human being faces the weather. For example, the eye of the Oriental, the eyelid of the Oriental, it has a specific name that I don't remember from the literature, is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created providentially to protect the eye from extreme cold. And they believe that the ancestors of the people with this feature came from Siberia, from the places that were very, very cold. The white skin with very little melanin in it, for example, of the Northern European races, lets a great deal of sunlight through to the second and third layers of the skin underneath the mesoderm, where vitamin D is synthesized. And so for such people, two 10-minute exposures to the sun a week is sufficient to prevent them from getting rickets, a vitamin D deficiency disease.